It's good to be here. That's kind of my go-to phrase when we come here with the HeartChangeU live stream. We're glad that you're joining us, whether it's now or later. If it is now, we'd love to have you put some questions to us or comments. I love to interact in real time, and that's part of why we have the real questions on Tuesdays, just to take those kind of questions, whether they come in live or they come in later. And thank you for joining with us and interacting. Today, Kimberly had personal stuff going on, so she wasn't able to join us. But Rebecca, it's great to have you with us.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
We baptized you with fire last week, and got that initial first program out of the way, where you're like, okay, what are we doing here? How do we do this?
Yes. So it's good to be back. Thank you.
And you survived program
I did.
one.
Yeah, it was fine.
And
I'm
you did
in one
that.
piece.
You know, it is very apropos that you are here today,
Yes.
because the topic is about worry, letting go of worry, and especially in the area of addiction. If you have, we're talking about codependency, and the Living Hope series is if I have somebody that in my orb, in my sphere, that's using, if I have somebody that's in a very unhealthy zone, and I'm frustrated, I'm off the charts. You've experienced some of that and had to fight through that, and you found us, so to speak, and have been interacting with us over a period of time. I think I'll jump in and put it in your court first. Hopefully you're able to handle this right off. But if you were to say the tool, the one thing that I've learned, or the one thing that I do, that I implement, that has helped me in this area of worry more than any other, what would you say that is?
What's helped me the most is knowing that I can't actually do anything about it. It's knowing that God's got bigger plans, bigger resources, bigger everything, and I'm very limited in what I can do. I can't convince someone or any of those things. I mean, I've got to take it to prayer.
It's interesting that with AA, we're thinking about the addict when we talk about powerlessness, but with the codependent.
Yeah.
One of the most significant things is that same state of powerlessness. And so that's the first thing that you brought up.
Yeah, and it's true. And in any aspect, I mean, even I have a 5-year-old that, like, I had the 3 kids, and so they had each other, and then I have a 5-year-old, and I feel like he's an only child, and my heart hurts for his loneliness. And so I'm always trying to rack my brain about trying to find a play date or whatnot. And finally the other day, I was like, God, you have to handle his loneliness. Like, I can't. I've obviously been trying to meddle. God says not to. And so but even recognizing those things of what I need to let go of so that I can let God do what God does.
And that is incredibly powerful. And I believe, one-liner that I use a lot, you can only be hurt by what you care about. And your codependents tend to care about others at a high level.
Yeah.
They care about nurturing, caregiving, mothering, whatever language that you want to use. And so they respond in that way. And because they're responding in that way, you can only be hurt by what you care about. So if I really care about my children, or I really care about whoever it is, and I'm powerless to help that area.
Yeah.
Now it's not just painful because I'm seeing them. It's painful to me because I feel like I should be able to do something about that, and I'm powerless.
Yes, exactly. And I think even like the example that I was set by my own parents, it was a lot of dysfunction. And so then trying to almost reparent myself and, parent my children. I mean, it's a lot of learning. And that's why I've loved the program, because there's been so many tangible things that I'm like, I struggle with confusion and rambling, and I'm like, I know I need something, but I don't know what it is. And like you had the one things about like the spiritual foundations and that safety piece, which is peace. And I was like that, and so then I aim for that, or whatever type, and then help, lay those foundations in my children. And so it's been great.
It's interesting that you use that language about parenting yourself, because some of the people, a good block of the people, who struggle the most in that codependency area, I use the term rescuers, but they have the parenting gene, if you will. Mm-hmm. They have that gene of, I need to be the adult in the room. I need to be that caregiver type of a person. And very often, if they grew up in anything somewhat dysfunctional, they become the adult in the room. And so that whole parenting themselves many times actually does start very, very early.
Yeah, because my mom was an addict. And so, she had very few moments of sobriety through her life. And so I did take that on, and I was the oldest child. And I had sisters once they were 5, when I was 5. And so, you can definitely see that happening and taking over.
And then what that does, that creates what I call adult child.
Yes.
To where all of a sudden now I'm trying to do things that are over my head. Mm-hmm. They're beyond my capability, beyond my ability. So when I'm trying to do that, now that puts me in this place of heaviness. Mm-hmm. That puts me in this place of, I feel like I need to do this, but I'm not capable of doing this. So then there's a kind of self-hatred that develops out of that, because it's like I'm not measuring up. Then in order, and this is what we do, I call it ego swings, in order to compensate for that, then I have to do an ego swing over here where I'm now super mom. Now I'm super caregiver, and so if I'm not super mom, super caregiver, and it doesn't even stop there, and if the people aren't responding extremely well to me, then all of that comes cascading back in on myself of what's wrong with me. God created me to do this. They don't necessarily think of it in those terms, right. But God created me to do this. I have this instinct that says I should be able to do this. And now I'm just pouring all of that stuff all over me. It's like dousing yourself with gasoline and lighting a match. I'm pouring that stuff all over me and wondering why life is so difficult for me.
Yeah, exactly.
You can relate to what
very much so.
What I just said. And so it's interesting. I actually didn't know that part of your story, that you went through what I would call adult child.
Yes.
And so then coming out of that into raising your own children, you probably had, sorry to expose you and do this to you, okay, but you probably had all sorts of vows of, my kids are never going to, and they will never be exposed to, and you go through all of that sort of a thing, which does what? It takes the adult child and it just takes it several notches higher all over again.
Well, and that's what was hard too, because their dad, we divorced because of domestic violence, so there was a lot of dysfunction there. And I had to let go early. I remember one of the first times their dad actually showed up for the weekend and took them. And I went home, I had a glass of wine, and within half an hour he called and he was like, you got to pick up the kids now. I can't have them. And just dumped them somewhere. And so then I had a lot of panic. And it was the first time that I was like, I can't do this. I can't watch them when they're with their dysfunctional dad or anything. And so it was the first time that I was like, God, you've got to step in and protect them where I can't. And did I catch every time? No, but it was at least the beginning.
So, and I would assume that was long before you ever met us and you started studying our stuff. And so, but you got your first taste of, I'm not capable of doing this. Yes. I am powerless. That was kind of taste number one in that whole area.
Well, and that's what I think, I had a taste, but the way things are done here, it's so applicable. It just makes sense versus I just was, and especially in confusion, I was just grasping and didn't have anybody to give me that outward confirmation of, yes, that is correct. So
now let's step over that boundary where we are. The topic today is letting go of worry. So we've talked about pain, we've talked about adult child, we've talked about all those things that set us up. If I am that adult child, if I am that caregiver rescuer, of course, my next thing is to worry. That becomes an instinctive response. What keys have you found that have helped you step out of that place of worry?
I think, like I had mentioned, just being limited, knowing that God's just going to do a better job than I can. But sometimes what I have trouble, I like your verbiage of when to sit down and when to stand up. And so, like, I had one child that was in foster care from 12 till she aged out. And that was one of the beginning times where there was a lot of times my hands were tied because of legal or whatnot or distance. And I think we came up with a number that she tried to take her life like 16 times through that time frame or whatnot. I mean, and there was just some really hard times, and I felt like Abraham and Isaac, that there was this promise of a child, but yet in all the extent that Abraham had to do to when God was like, okay, now I need you to sacrifice your son. It wasn't just like, okay, I'll like compulsively just do what you said or something. Or it was okay, I need to like get all these men together, and I need to make a trip, and I need to collect firewood, and I need to build an altar, and then I need to like convince these people to stay down here. And I can't tell them that God told me to, because that just doesn't, I mean, it was just the whole process that I felt like God was walking me through over and over of laying them down at the altar.
I go back to this verse out of 1 Corinthians 6, verse 12. Really powerful verse, and, maybe choose a different translation in terms of verbiage. But all things are lawful for me, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful, but I will not be brought under the power of any. And, of course, the context is just very, very different here. But I love that language in terms of this whole area. If you're a caregiver, if you are an adult child, it's instinctive to go into that place of worry. I mean, that's just there. And as I listened to you, what I heard, you at some point began to realize you at least got to a more practical step of going, okay, this is not helping anything.
Right.
I'm not going to be able to get anywhere, so I better start practicing some different steps that are healthier for me and or as helpful as we can be.
Right. And I mean, I still struggle. You had mentioned something about like the load that, when I can't do enough, I have this heavy load. And I was like, that's probably why I'm so tense all the time. And so the more I learn to let go and let God do, be God, maybe my body will start to relax too.
And so let's just go there in terms of that's a great description of worry and letting go of worry. Let's break down what you just said. Let go and let God be God. Do you have any tips there that would be helpful for people? You didn't know you were going to be grilled and be the program today. But anyway, any tips that you have for people?
What I know, like, it works, but I know I do a lot of intellectual, and then it's getting my heart to follow too. And so I feel kind of like it's an onion. It's layers upon layers of keep laying it down.
So you start at an intellectual level, and again, this can be different for different people,
right.
But you start at an intellectual level of, okay, I need to let God be God. I'm powerless anyway.
Right.
I can't change this. So, and one of the one-liners that I use, the best thing you can do for your children, for those you love, is to be, in your case, to be a woman of God, either a man or woman of God. If you believe what I just said, now that takes some work, but if you believe what I just said, I am doing something now.
Right.
If I change, my situation changes. If I change, if I grow, if I get to a better place, when I do have the opportunity to interact, I can bring the best version of me. I can bring something that helps.
Yes, exactly. And I know that's, been my thing too, because my love that I have to offer is very limited because I'm a person and I'll get tired or snippy or whatever type. And so that's been my prayer is just, God, I need your love to be pouring into me so that I can love the way you want me to be a real witness.
What I talk about almost always, if you're talking about worry or fear or anxiety or any of those, worry is in what I call the vision family. Now, what's interesting, faith is in the vision family. Faith is positive vision that will take you someplace positive. Worry is negative vision that may or may not come to pass, may have a substance, may not, but is always going to take me a bad place. So I know that it's not helpful. I know that in the end it's destructive. It's going to pour toxic stuff into my body. It's going to prevent me from connecting with God. It's going to prevent me from growing and being the woman of God, so that when the time comes for me to speak into it, I can be there. And so this language of helpful and shifting focus. If worry is vision,
Right.
which it is, and faith is vision, which it is, if I can somehow find a new focus and I can really stare that thing down, I go a long ways towards being able to let go of worry, which is part of why I started with all things are lawful.
Right.
Okay, go ahead and worry if you want.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you'll be exhausted. You'll be a worse person. You won't have connected with God. You won't have done anything positive. But not all things are helpful. And we really have to do self-talk.
Yeah.
Where you have to step back and go, whoa, this is not helpful. It is not going to take me a good direction. It is not going to help the person I'm wanting to help. I need to stop. And a lot of times it's actually helpful to say that out loud to yourself.
Yes. Well, and that's what even I remember going to a Bible study recently that they were talking about Isaac and Rebecca. And I was hearing the story, and in my brain, I'm like, oh, I've heard this a million times. What am I going to get out of it? And I was like, no, stop that. God, what are you going to do? And then the way the person leading talked about it, and they talked about how Rebecca heard that the oldest was going to serve the youngest. And so if she heard that, then what did she probably do through her life? She fed that. She, probably helped coerce that or whatnot. And I was like, oh, she was meddling. She was meddling because she was facilitating God, because God obviously needs to be facilitated. And that's when God was like, that's me. Like, how often, I'm helping, I'm being, an encourager or whatnot, but I'm actually just getting in the way.
When we worry and then we meddle, frankly, if your kids are used to you, dirty word, manipulating.
Yeah.
If they're used to you controlling, what does everybody naturally do when there's manipulation and control? They naturally move away from that place. So my worry actually causes me to get stirred up in a way, to respond in ways where I'm pushing them away. And then you add the manipulation coat to where you throw a little bit of deception in there. Maybe not total deception, but I'm working my language in a way. I'm being very careful.
All to be helpful.
All to be helpful. And at some point, the kids begin to notice what's going on. And as they notice what's going on, then you get all the greater pushback at that point, which again, where does worry take us? It is not helpful. It actually ends up destroying the very thing that I want to do.
Yes, exactly. So,
well, what other great points do you have for us? I would tell you it's been fun.
Yeah.
I mean, just talking with you and playing off from some of the different thoughts that are there to help people in this area of worry.
Yeah, one place I want to get better at is the stand up, sit down, like I was mentioning, but because I found like it was really easy when my child was in foster care. I mean, it got easier to lay her down because she wasn't where I could actually do something. And so that's something that I'm actively working on, is when I have someone underfoot, so to say, like I'm there, I can reach them, I can do, and for God's like, shh, don't say that. They're mine. I'm doing it. And I'm like, but I'm sure if I said this, it would be helpful.
What you're talking about is a false sense of power.
Yes.
And we all have that, frankly, when I'm dealing with addicts. That's one of the most frustrating moments, is when people walk in and I've learned my lesson and I know what I need to do. And at that point, it's like, if you know what you need to do, you won't listen. And if you won't listen, you'll continue to respond according to your instincts. And if you continue to respond according to your instincts, you are going to do it again.
Yes.
And they don't like that. Same thing is true on the rescuing, caregiving end. I don't believe that I'm powerless.
Right.
So now I'm going to jump in. I don't believe that I will slide into manipulation. I don't believe any of that. once I finally believe that, then it's much easier to, as you say, sit down and say, no, anything I say, unless or until I'm prompted by God, unless or until I'm in a better place spiritually, anything I say can or will be, I always like to throw in here, multiplied,
Yes.
distorted, and twisted, and then used against me.
Yeah. No, it's very true, and that's what I mean. God's just been on me so much on that level, and I can see improvements in things when I keep my mouth closed. That God's like, you let me do it, and hopefully the Holy Spirit will minister to the other person too, and we're all seeking God.
And it feels ridiculous, it feels wrong, it feels counterproductive, but get your own heart right first.
Yes.
I say that over and over again. The Sermon on the Mount, some of the most powerful language in all of the Scripture. You can start at the very beginning, and it says, get your own heart right first, next set of verses. Get your own heart right first, next set of verses. Get your own heart right first. And that's so powerful here that if I am a worrier, then I will guarantee that all of the things that you're talking about that are negative and counterproductive will happen.
Yeah.
People don't hear your words. They see your heart. They hear messages, and the messages come out of your heart. So if you're worrying, they're going to feel looked down on, manipulated, controlled. I mean, all of the other things. They're going to hear a different message than you think that you're giving to them.
Right. It's important to listen to God then.
Well, it really is.
Yeah.
Because if I get something surrendered, and frankly, the two things that I would talk about with worry is, number one, is vision. So work at changing your focus. Well, I can't stop. I'm worried about it. You've got to find a way, change your focus.
Right. And that's what I've been reading something on prayer. And then at some point in time, you have to start praising God for his working in it and whatnot. And so, I mean, that's a good way to be able to change our focus is, okay, we've had our prayer, we've told God our grievances. And that's something too that God, I had heard or recently read the story about the first miracle that Jesus did when he was with his mom, and his mom went to him and he's like, they're out of wine, and he's like, it's not my time or whatnot. But what the part of it that I got out of it with what I was reading was she didn't go and, okay, here's my problem and this is all the things you should do to fix it. She was like, this is the problem. And I was like, that's what I need to do with God. God already knows. I don't need to try to fix it for him because I'm powerless. And accepting that just makes it a lot easier.
What's crazy, if you go on in that story, her response wasn't to try to manipulate Jesus or make anything happen. She walked over to the servants and said, whatever he says to do, you do it.
Yes. And so there wasn't, I mean, she still wasn't meddling at all. She was just do what he says.
Yeah,
exactly.
She was probably in a position of authority there where it kind of came back on her, and it was her reputation at stake. I mean, we don't know the rest of that. But so she just goes to the servants, whatever he says to do, you just do that.
Yes. So, well, and also the prodigal son, like I've always heard the prodigal son about the prodigal son. You know, he ran away and he came back and he was, but then one day I heard it from the son that stayed there. And he's like, what about me? I never even got a goat. And his dad was like, but everything I have is yours. And what I heard from that was that God was like, everything I have is yours. Like if you ask. And so then I can seek him boldly and know that, I can just tell him my problems and he's going to help. He's going to do what he does. And so that's been helpful.
Let me put an asterisk there, which is a very difficult one to overcome. But the verses in Revelation where Jesus says, behold, I stand at the door and knock. I don't see any place in Scripture where God absolutely runs over the will of man. Now, are there times when judgment goes forth? Yes, and so you could say, okay, what about that? He's running over there. There are times when wickedness gets to a point where there's a collective judgment, and that happens in individuals, it happens, etc. So you could argue my point. But when it comes to heart change, when it comes to as a mother reaching out to children or parents or whoever, ultimately, for there to be a solution, I need to win that person's heart, or God needs to win that person's heart, or there needs to be substantive change there. And the picture is God stands at the door and knocks. So what you want as a caregiver, you want to be able to come in, absolutely take control, force things, make things happen at a level that not even God is going to do.
Yeah.
And so to be able to step back from that, and then we get into the second part. I talked about shifting focus. To me is the most single powerful tool in terms of worry. And again, sometimes people say, how? How do I not? Well, engage your body.
Right.
Engage your mind. Do something.
Be intentional.
Active. Yeah, be intentional in terms of that. But the second piece that goes with that that's so powerful is the surrender piece. I have to believe that what God can and will do is greater than what I will do. I have to believe that I am powerless. I have to believe that if my own heart is messed up, I'm actually not just powerless, I'm harmful. I'm going to send bad messages. I'm going to make the situation worse than it actually is. If you actually start believing those things, and this is where you've gotten to and what you're describing, now I'm able to let go. I'm able to surrender. When I do that, I begin to experience the presence of God, the grace of God, the lifting of God. It's just a completely different experience than when I'm trapped in that place of worry.
It is, and I love working here and all the things that I learned. But one of the women showed me the AA book of what could I just not let go of? And I'd never thought of it in that point of view. And what it was that I was trying to control was people not abusing me. And so then, like we talked about last, that's where my nicety comes in, or trying to meddle or whatnot. But so there's just so many, if we don't close ourselves off and understand that we have room to grow and at all points and let God move, just how big he can be.
And so you feared people abusing you.
Yeah.
But I'm going to suggest, and I talk about this a lot, some of the deepest pain in our lives is actually the self-talk. So on the one hand, you feared that, and so you're trying to manipulate and control that and keep that protected. But on the other hand, that deep person in you, whether it was with your parents and it's adult child, whether it's with your kids, there's a deep place in you that's like, I should be able to fix this. I should be able to do something about this. That typically is the hardest voice to quiet down.
Yeah, and it's like, the hardest part is recognizing that that's a spot that I need to let go of. It's not, we're hungry, I should go fix dinner, because that just seems like a simple, tangible, there's so many, the way my brain works, I'm like, oh, I can fix everything. I can't use a handsaw, but that's about it that I can't do. And so to let go, I'm like, oh, that's not mine. And so it is a challenge.
And you're right. It's not I can go fix dinner. When you're dealing with people and you're dealing with heart change, it's interactive.
Yeah.
So unless or until I'm able to build trust, unless or until I'm able to get cooperation going, I am powerless to do anything here. And so that trust piece ends up being the middle piece that, I've got to get my own heart right first.
Yeah.
I've got to get to a place of not worrying. As long as I'm staying in that place of worry, I might be able to say some things that are healthier, that express things in a way that I feel better about me because I at least said something.
Right.
But the odds are good that no matter what you try to do, how you try to do, if you don't deal with that worry in your own heart first, real good chance you're going to mess it up.
Yes, it's very true.
Any other thoughts? You've led us in some great directions today. I've loved it. I've loved spending the time with you.
Yeah, no, I think that's good, and just and I think the hardest part is accepting, like, even though I had good intentions, accepting how I mean, it's awful to manipulate and try to control and things. And so I can't change something if I deny it. So I felt God really moved when he's like, okay, I've been trying to tell you this for a while, but I'm glad you heard me now. And here we go. So
I love that, because worriers tend to assign to themselves good intentions.
yeah. And it's not helpful.
And it is not helpful.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead and assign good intentions
Right.
to yourself, but then look in the mirror and say, it doesn't matter if I mean well.
Right.
What matters is what is,
Yes.
and whether or not I'm having a good outcome.
Yeah. And having to take that responsibility or whatnot of just owning it was, I mean, that was gross. It was been much nicer to stay in denial and no, I'm just a nice person, it's fine. So I think, but understanding that I mean, that's why God's grace and mercy comes in, and we will be better if we accept that instead of being in denial.
Change of focus, letting go, new one that you brought up, recognizing those intentions, stay in reality based to where, what's helpful here? Am I doing the best kinds of things?
Yeah.
I feel like we've given a lot of practical things.
Yeah. Well, and remembering that other people see us better than ourselves. And so if we're getting this message, really, really sit with it and think about, I mean, is everybody really a jerk, or is it actually something in me that could be changed, that God could change? I mean, that's why we need our fellowship and community.
Again, I'm going to add to good intentions. I think worriers, because of the nature of worry, they really feel like they care. They don't, it's not just intentions. I think they just assign things to themselves. And it's just like, as long as you're assigning that to yourself, you won't stop.
Yeah.
You'll feel justified. You'll feel hurt. You'll feel angry. And at some point, it's like, no, stop.
Yeah.
It's destructive.
Yes.
And you have to admit that it's destructive so that you can move towards change.
Yes, exactly.
Any other surprises?
I don't think
I'm
so.
about ready to wrap it up here, but
We're good.
you keep coming up with new things, and
Yeah.
I'm loving it. It's been good.
Good.
I've enjoyed the time with you. Hopefully you've enjoyed the time with us, and again, pass it on to others. There's so many people who struggle in this area of worry, especially if they have a loved one that's in addiction or in major dysfunction. Pass it on. I believe it can give hope to people. It'll give tools to people. And we look forward to seeing you next time